Major flashing lights warning. Enjoy the show. Hello everyone, my name is AJ, and I haven't come up with a good intro yet. Today I'm going to attempt to make a 3D model of Alastor in Blender. I'm going to be modeling my AU design of Alastor, because this model is intended strictly for me and my use. Alastor is the most difficult character for me to draw. His facial proportions, especially from the front, are very specific. If you get them even slightly wrong, he looks either whack or far too cute. Usually whack. I need to clarify right now that I am not a 3D person at all. I've followed the DumbAhh model tutorial before, but that's kind of it. I believe I've modeled a face before, but I never finished it and it didn't turn out right at all. I wish I still had a copy of it. If I can find the file, I'll show it to you. Even still, I've never modeled a face like this before. What I did was I created a single point, then extruded all the other points from there. To create this single point, I added in a cube, went into edit mode, and then merged all the points at the center. Then I went back into object mode, moved the point into place, and then started extruding. I outlined everything with the points. I made certain to keep all of the major pieces separate from each other in case I messed up or needed to change things, which was a good call, because I did. I started with the front view, and then afterwards I did the side view, making adjustments as necessary. I did make a mistake early on though, which I wouldn't realize until later. I should have put on a mirror multiplier so that I only had to model one side and it would be symmetrical automatically. It would have saved me a lot of grief, but I didn't and made a lot more work for myself. Big whoop. I know it kinda looks like I'm not doing anything here, but I promise I was doing a lot of work. Creating all the outlines took about 2.5 hours. Holy crap, I didn't realize it took that long. This was the shortest part of the process. Oh my goodness gracious. After all of the outlines were done, I had to figure out how to make them 3D. I attempted to start with the eyes and mouth by creating 3D outlines around them. I tried my darndest more than once to try to get the mouth looking accurate to both the front and side references, but it did not work. It was about this point that I realized just how strange Alastor's design is, and my art style by extension. Depending on which angle I'm drawing him from, Alastor's design will change slightly. From the side, his ears are more at an angle than what's realistic. From the side, his ears are at more of an angle than what's more accurate to real deer ears. The angle of his nose is also tilted up more. His eyes are also in profile no matter what angle he's drawn in. In profile, the angle of his nostrils is more flattened, his ears are straight up and rotated forward, which honestly makes him look more like a donkey. So yeah, getting that all figured out in a 3D space was no easy feat. At about this point, I realized that I had far too much detail happening all at once and it was overwhelming me. I'm really grateful that I did everything in separate pieces, so it was easy to just hide the pieces I didn't want to look at. I did have to completely redo the mouth though, because the original mouth just wasn't working. I also had to just accept that the mouth wasn't going to look completely accurate to the side profile like I wanted. But that's okay, I don't mind that. What I landed on works well enough. Once I got all that sketched out, I could finally start creating the faces for real. This is the longest part of the process. The nose was the easiest part because it was the most consistent across both front and side views. After that, I lined the mouth and then did the cheeks and the jaw. I brought the eyes back and tilted them back slightly to make them make more sense. They don't look correct at all yet, but they were still a necessary part to build off of. I'll probably change them later, I don't know yet. I haven't finished the model at the time of writing this part of the script. Once those were in place, the model looked very whack. The reason why my computer paused for a minute there was because I needed to take a break to just laugh at how stupid this thing looked. When I was done with that, I started working my way up the bridge of the nose, then everything under the eyes too. Sphere jump scare! I thought the easiest way to do this would be to make the head divorced from the antlers, hair, and ears first, and then make all of those details later. Since I'm not sculpting this in the usual way, I needed some sort of guide to make it round. Crafting a sphere by hand might just be the worst thing ever. I'm really wishing that I had done this in a different way because it didn't turn out the way that I wanted at all. I'm just hoping I can fix it in the smoothing phase, because otherwise I might have to just throw in the towel or something. It was even harder because Alastor's head isn't even a perfect circle, it's more of an oval.
This is what we call foreshadowing.
It's too bad I don't have much to talk about in this section because it took so darn long and it was so unfun. This was like a solid hour and a half of pure misery until I finally took a break to work on the jawbones again. Oh my goodness, the jawbones. They were so satisfying. So much fun to do instead. Since I was having such a lack of fun, I worked on the eyes again and filled in the mouth just to procrastinate doing the back of the head more. Eventually I got so fed up with working on the head that I decided to just fill it all in, even if it wasn't the right shape, with the promise to myself to fix it in the sculpting tab. Hi, I'm AJ from the future. I'll be doing the rest of the video. This all turned out to be completely useless. I'm just as angry, if not more than you. Sorry for wasting so much of your time, but if I had to go through it, so do you. So what happened was after I came back from my little break of several days, I realized the head shape sucked so much that it had to go away. I had this idea to make an undersculpt and then snap the face to it, and then I realized that the sculpt was way better. So away all of my previous work went, and I pivoted to doing the rest of it purely through sculpting. Anyway, so I started by trying to do it with a rounded cube because I've heard that's a good way to do it. It didn't work, so I switched to a sphere and that worked better, and this time I actually remembered to turn on a mirror modifier, so I only had to sculpt the one side. Sculpting his general head shape still wasn't easy though. His head shape is very strange when you're considering it from a 3D perspective instead of a 2D one. I made it work though. There were a few compromises that needed to be made though. In the side reference, his mask goes up a little higher than it does in the front view, but it looks really strange from the side view if his entire head is that tall. I guess I could have made his faceplate and the rest of his head 2 different pieces, but I didn't think about it at the time, and I don't want to do that. After I had the general shape of the head done, I started roughing in the details. I pressed in some eye sockets for him and gave his cheekbones lots of definition. There was a seam in the middle where the geometry was a little weird, so I went into edit mode to fix it. After I got that seam fixed to my standards, it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. I went back into the sculpt to work on the eye sockets again. I couldn't quite match them to the shape of the sockets in the original drawing from either side. It's a very strange shape. I made them look more like regular eye sockets instead. I tried to make them deeper without making them too big. I had to go inside of the head in order to get them deeper without making them pointy. I found a way to get them closer to the reference by making them longer against the side of the nose. There weren't quite enough faces inside of that little cavity to get the correct shape, so I went back into edit mode and slid the verts around a bit. This fixed the sides of the sockets. I also slid verts around until I had enough vertices inside of the sockets in order to get them the shape that I wanted. I also did a little bit of sculpting on his nose. Jump scare, he's green now and also has a mouth. My screen recording software is really buggy. Sometimes if I try to use it, it'll break Blender completely and I can't click on anything. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it and I was tired, so I just did some modeling off camera. It wasn't that interesting to watch anyway. So he has a mouth now and it's time to get started on the ears. I tried a sphere at first, but I didn't want to go into the shape I wanted without completely ruining the geometry, and I didn't want to mess with it anymore. I wanted to try the bridging faces method one more time because it's kind of relaxing. I messed with this for a long time, but the problem is that it's 2D when I use this method. I think my goal was to try and get them the right shape and then use a modifier to thicken them up, but I didn't do that. Return of the cube. I started with a very simple subdivided cube and used sculpting to try and force it into the right shape. This almost worked, but the tips of the ears broke. Rather than go through the geometry again to fix it, I decided to just start over. It's not like it took that long anyway. This time I subdivided it more than once. I decided to shape it to the side view of the ear first this time. I still didn't have quite enough room to work with, so I used the inflate tool to give myself some more space. Once I had it shaped to the side view, I fixed the front view by simply pulling the excess material in towards the ear and smoothing it over. I didn't smooth them a ton though, I kinda liked the crooked look. Oh, also antlers jump scare, I did those while my camera was down too. Now it's time for the hair. The hair was what I was most worried about because it looks very different from different perspectives. I had no idea how I was going to make it swoop correctly in both directions. I tried sculpting it in one piece, but there was no way that was going to work, so I had to change my idea. I started by making a base for all the hair swoops to fit onto. It looks a little weird right now, just trust the process, it'll be fine. I decided to start with the biggest one because that seemed like the hardest one to do. I started by shaping it to the front view, which was really easy. Then I did the side view by rotating it so that it was easier to sculpt it to fit that perspective. Then I went back to the front view and fixed it again. In order to make it look right from both perspectives, I had to compromise with the front. I made it Alastor swoops from the front so that it would look right from the side. After I did that, the little swoop was weirdly harder. I couldn't get it to smooth onto the main piece very smoothly. I tried deleting its backside and manually attaching all of the vertices, which sort of worked. There was still a bit of a crease though. This becomes really obvious when I officially join the two pieces so that Blender would read them as one. I don't know why the matte cap looks so weird. For those who don't know, a matte cap is just the color that Blender uses to render the piece in while you're working on it so that your computer doesn't have to slow itself down by loading in all of the shadows from the lights. It's also easier to see what's going on than looking at just the plain materials with no shadows at all. The one that I use most is the rainbow one because I think it looks pretty. I tried to use a few different matte caps to see if it was just some sort of glitch. It wasn't. I tried really hard to force it to smooth out. Spoilers, it never did. I messed with it for far longer than necessary before finally giving up. The big swoop smoothed in much better, but it's still not great, but thankfully only if you're paying attention. While I was going through and removing the parts of the geometry that were weird inside of the hair, I accidentally deleted more than I meant to. Thankfully I had saved before I started smoothing, so I just quit without saving and it was all fine. Now it's time for the little swoop in the back. I just repeated the steps for the other hair strands really easy, made certain it actually attached the head, compromised with the side profile a bit, moving on. Now for the pain that was the second part of the base. I had to model in what the rest of his hair looked like, which was not easy at all. The hair on top of his head, it's a lot, but it's not very long, it's pretty short. So getting the second part of the base to be as flat as I wanted it to be was no easy task. Blending the pieces into each other is really difficult to do. I don't know why it's so hard. It's probably because I don't know what I'm doing, but I made it work as best I could. I repeated the process for the third part on the other side. And now finally for the ponytail. The ponytail was probably the easiest part of the process. By this point I had it down, I knew what I was doing almost. I again sculpted a main shape and then attached the swoops to that main part. It does look a little weird from the front view for now, but that'll be fixed when I add the neck. I did the small swoop first. For the front view, I had to add a third swoop so you could see the second swoop from both angles. Just like I did for the antlers that you didn't get to see but will see eventually, I'm certain. And then I lost some footage. Making the end of the tail was the same process as making the big swoop in his hair. And now finally we get to the eyes. I wanted the pupils to be floating inside the eye sockets like lights instead of true eyeballs. I got a simple sphere and sculpted it into the right shape, and then I purposely sculpted it into the wrong shape because I thought it looked better. I was wrong, by the way. His face looks completely different once he's got his makeup done. The way that his eyelids do make his face look more slender than it is, which is why different expressions on his eyes look so strange to me. I changed them later, don't worry. And since I lost the footage of me making the antlers forever ago, I might as well just explain it here. What I did was it's the same process, but the compromise that I made was, how I draw it in the 2D version is that it's only got like two spike bits to it. In order to see the little spiky things, the antler nubs, whatever they're called, in order to be able to see those from both perspectives, I had to make it 3 instead of just 2, so it would be visible from both sides. And I very specifically angled them so that way you couldn't see the third one from the front or from the side, so it's hard to explain. You kind of just have to look at it. I'm sorry. And it's done. I'm sorry I didn't get any footage of me making the UV maps because my software was bugging out again. It's the story of my life for this project, apparently. It's unfortunate that I lost all that footage because that probably would have been the most interesting part of the process to watch since it's the closest to what I usually do. It wasn't easy, unfortunately. There were some weird glitches with the geometry where the colors would draw where I didn't want them to and wouldn't go in certain places. I managed to fix it, but yeah, that was a pain. I did the neck too. It was boring. It was just like doing the hair. The process is really just rinse and repeat for all the different pieces and then just do your darndest to try and blend them together. For the final render, I turned down the smoothness on all the pieces so the lighting would cast on them in a way that looked more like a 2D cartoon. I was thinking about painting all the shadows in by hand, like some 3D artists do, but I didn't want to do that. And this video is already 2 weeks in the making and I want it to be over now. Anyway, here's the boy. He's a boy. I don't have anything else to say anymore. Maybe? Wait, no, I'm gonna keep yapping. I've got 2 more paragraphs I have to say. The file will be available to buy in my Patreon shop for $3. I would price it lower, but Patreon has this really weird policy where they force you to price everything as at least $3 so they can take more of a cut. I guess for the first time sculpting a head to completion, I think I did pretty alright. I don't know if I would say I'm proud of myself, but I'm glad I did it. I definitely need more practice though. Maybe I'll do other characters too, but I'm gonna need a massive break from this kind of art before I'm ready to subject myself to that. Anyway, check out the links in the description. Buy the head if you want to. I have a Discord. Make sure you actually select your roles in the rules tab. I take commissions, all that jazz. See ya. Yeah, I just realized I forgot his monocle.